Hello, and welcome to the 2024 Presidential Race Review. I'm Lisa Schiffren, a former Republican speechwriter, and with me is David Eisenbach, professor of presidential history at Columbia University. Tonight, we're going to wrap up the 2024 election. We're going to talk a little bit about what happened, what didn't happen, what should have happened, and what needs to happen next. So please stick with us, and we hope you're entertained.
So Lisa, we're 2 weeks out from the election, although this episode will be airing after the election, so we're kind of in a unique position to comment on this. But, you know, I'm just curious, both parties are going to be facing an existential crisis, either way, whether they win or when they lose. If Donald Trump loses, what happens with the Republicans?
If Donald Trump loses, Mitch McConnell and people like Paul Ryan and maybe not Mike Johnson, but a bunch of the Republican establishment in Congress and the donor class are thrilled. They're so happy because they get to take back the party and they get to remake it in the image of the kind of Bush-Romney years, which I think was a disaster. But I think there are a lot of people who are looking forward to that. I think what will actually happen is the party will move forward because you'll have people like J.D. Vance and Ron DeSantis in place to run next time. The MAGA agenda, the America First agenda, will still actually have some power. So I think Trump will be gone, which will make a lot of people happy. Yeah. And a lot of the good parts of his agenda will linger on.
All right. Because it's interesting the role that the Cheneys are playing in this race. And Kamala Harris today did a number of events with Liz Cheney in the key states of Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin. So the Democrats are kind of embracing the neocon wing of the Republican Party. I'm not sure this is going to work, but would Republicans sort of say, wait a second, you know, we need to win back the neocon?
No. I think the neocon wing of the party are all never Trumpers, and they have done themselves in. They have taken themselves out of the game. I think Liz Cheney, by embracing Kamala Harris, has ended her career. Her career ended when the voters of her district kicked her out with a resounding, thump. She lost by a huge margin. I used to love Lynn Cheney. I thought she was great. I thought she was smart, articulate, hardcore. She's really, I think, been disastrous in the last couple of years, and I don't see that going anywhere. I think the Cheneys have completed their time in the Republican hierarchy, and they're over.
So you're not seeing, some disaffected neocon Republicans who are switching to Harris for this election?
No, there are never Trumpers, all of whom at this point are Democrats. They've all embraced the Democrat Party. Half of them are on the Democrat payroll or the payroll of people who are in fact Democrats. Those people are gone. They're a footnote. They ran an interesting few years as the conservative elite, as intellectuals, but they couldn't adapt when the party got past the George Bush globalist years and the Mitt Romney kind of hedge fund years. A populist nationalist party is not something they're comfortable with. They don't know anybody like that. They're not from the Appalachian Mountains. They're not from the Rust Belt.
And they're globalists.
They're globalists, for real. They really believe that stuff.
Yeah.
Right.
So, but that's going to be a battle.
Also, you know what? All their wars failed. All their wars failed.
Yes.
Iraq is no better off than before we invaded.
Yeah.
Afghanistan is worse off.
Yeah.
Libya, sad. So they failed. I mean, their philosophy proved itself useless.
But what's so amazing is, even though they fail, they keep on coming back. They got a new project, whether it's in Ukraine or wherever else.
Yeah, there's always Ukraine.
There's always Ukraine. The Democrats are also going to face, if they lose, they're going to face a big existential crisis. And I think, the embrace of war and the embrace of the agenda where America is spending so much abroad rather than addressing problems at home has really hurt them. Not only kind of losing the Robert Kennedy wing and the Tulsi Gabbard wing, but also the trouble with Black and Latino male voters.
Well, I think if you live in the Bronx, and this is BronxNet TV, you look around and you think, why are we sending $800 million to Ukraine this week? We have plenty of things we could use it for here.
Yeah.
I think Black and Hispanic men are right to be more concerned with the economy, which is real, than with DEI, which is an ideology that is a disaster for everybody involved. I think, as a woman, I find it embarrassing that women seem to have embraced this stuff. But I think that I think Democrats. I mean, here's something we've seen. We've seen senatorial candidates in swing states embracing Donald Trump's economic agenda in ads because they don't want to be tarred with the Kamala brush. We've seen people lying in debates about how they voted on transgender issues because they, sorry, this thing keeps falling out. They, because they know these things are not popular. When 80% of the American people don't believe that men who become women should be allowed to run against women, real women in races, it's very hard to imagine that politicians are going to get elected embracing that. So I think I think it will be smart for the Democratic Party to move on from some of its furthest left cultural Marxism.
And from its kind of, in my opinion, right-wing militarism, that it's the sort of that move and losing Black and Latino votes. We're already seeing how Donald Trump is scoring historically high in terms of poll numbers.
Well, why do you think that is?
Because I think that they've lost out on this economy in particular. I mean, look, those groups always get hardest hit in tough times. We are entering into tough times. We're having this kind of stagflation economy. And despite what the government numbers are telling you, unemployment is not the best it's been since the Eisenhower administration, and inflation is not under control. They know it. We all know it. But the Democrats have been pushing this idea because, well, it's their economy, rather than addressing some real fundamental problems in the economy. And I think a lot of voters are going to turn on them.
Well, one of those fundamental problems that Donald Trump has been great on and that got him elected in 2016 is the export of our industrial base.
Yes.
And that, I was all for that. I was for NAFTA. I was a free market person. I thought that made the most sense. I thought we'd all do better.
That's what they told us. That's how they sold it.
And we
Bill
believed
Clinton
it.
told us, right? NAFTA could never have been done without Bill Clinton. Bill Clinton sold it that all boats are going to rise
That's
together.
right. Stuff would be cheaper for everyone. We forgot the part about some people wouldn't have jobs. So it can be as cheap as it wants. You can't afford it.
Right.
But it's been a disaster. And Donald Trump, I think, deserves real credit for bringing that back, for bringing that up as an issue and bringing it to the fore. I think Democrats would be wiser to. I don't understand what keeps them from embracing economic nationalism.
Wall Street money would be one.
Okay.
Okay, Wall Street money, number one. Number two, they're largely responsible. I'm not, obviously Democrats weren't the only ones driving the globalist agenda. Republicans too.
Republicans certainly have a hand in that.
but-
Both of the Bushes were ardent globalists.
And both the Clintons, I mean, so this is something that the American political elite embraced, and you had voices of dissent like Bernie Sanders, right, leading the charge, and then just got quiet. And so I think the Democratic Party's got to really sort of say, hey, maybe we need to start talking about bringing jobs back to the Midwest. Maybe that will help us win Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin again.
No, I think that's right. I think if Donald Trump wins, it will be in part for exactly that reason, because those swing states in the Midwest want those jobs. They want them more than anything else. They want inflation down. They want the border closed.
Yeah.
Bringing in a huge number of migrants when you've got problems with employment doesn't strike me as wise.
Yeah, and it's not just the loss of the jobs. When you lose your job, then you lose your sense of self
and place.
And so we are seeing, the opioid crisis, and we're seeing suicide rates among men of those working
Marriage
age
is
groups.
down because the men don't have jobs.
And we're seeing they're dropping out of the economy. Their labor force employment, they are just leaving, just so that they're not even counted anymore in the unemployment numbers. But they're still there, and they're angry and upset. And I think many of them are going to take their anger out on the Democrats this time around.
The question is, will they come out and vote? The thing I read today that I thought was interesting was that suburban women, college-educated suburban women vote. They show up. The people that Trump is relying upon, maybe they show up, maybe they don't. They don't necessarily vote most elections.
Well, that also has been depressing his numbers in terms of polls, because they're looking at most likely voters. And if you're not fitting in that category, then they're not counting you. So that's key to the entire election. And again, we're recording this weeks before the election, but one of the things, easy prediction is who turns out. Who actually shows up on election day to cast a ballot, because that will be determinative in a close election.
Okay, we're going to take a break, and when we come back, there'll be more. Hello, and welcome back to the 2024 Presidential Race Review. I'm Lisa Schiffren, a former Republican speechwriter, and with me is David Eisenbach, professor of presidential history at Columbia University. And we're on the topic of what just happened in the presidential race.
The presidential race that hasn't happened yet for us.
That hasn't happened
But
yet.
when this is air, everybody knows what happened. It's going to be a different world. My concern is that it's so close. It's a contested election. We now spend weeks waiting for Maricopa County or Clark County to get their acts together. And the country is just, at this fever pitch of, conspiracy theory and anger and fear and anxiety. I hope that is not what we're facing.
I hope it's not what we're facing too, although I've already read the excuses for we're not going to know by the end of the night. It's going to take a few days.
Okay.
At the risk of sounding like a conspiracy theorist, I think it's cheating. I think that if you've got an honest election, like the state of Florida, you can have your ballots counted by midnight.
It's frustrating to me because it's not like this is news. Like I said, we know Clark is going to be a problem, Maricopa is going to be a problem, but yet, and everybody says it's a problem, but it never gets fixed. And
no, it gets worse. More counties join the miscreants. One reason it takes so long is because if you're cheating, you have to actually figure out how many votes you need and have the ballots sent in.
Now, I'm not certain it's cheating necessarily, but it's either that or gross incompetence. Either way, when you're deciding the fate of America, to not have your act together, to not hire a ton of staff, Amazon, when they got a big holiday coming up, hires more staff.
But this is new. This is new. When we were kids, there was no such thing as the next day.
Right. Well,
every now and then somebody waited till the next morning, but mostly it was all done by 9, 10, 11 o'clock at night.
And elections weren't as close when we were younger. So this is our problem. It's like for years we just sort of coasted along. It was a blowout, Bill Clinton's blowouts, and then 2000 came around and it's like, whoa, maybe we really have to care about the design of ballots in Palm Beach.
Well, 2000 was a disaster.
It was a disaster.
But it's basically been since 2012, when, with the rise of electronic voting machines, that we've had these problems.
This does, yeah.
It's not that hard to hand count paper ballots.
And you got something there, tangible, right? Without doubt.
We need to go back to that, and we need to have identification. The average American wants voter ID, because every country that has honest elections uses voter ID, and we should be doing that too. There should not be lots of illegal immigrants voting in Arizona and California and Virginia and wherever else they've been found.
Yeah, I haven't heard. Have you heard stories?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. I haven't heard stories, but nonetheless, election integrity is key, especially in tight elections like this. I mean, we are dealing with people's lives. We're dealing with the future of America. But yet we don't seem to have our acts together. And the conspiracy theorist in me thinks this is a part of the design because it allows control by the political parties. And both parties pull fast ones on this.
I don't know. I wish I thought that were true.
In either case, one thing that I would hope at least or is being thought about by Mitch McConnell, Chuck Schumer, Johnson, Hakeem Jeffries, is what happens if we do have a contested election, something similar to what happened in 1876, where both parties refused to acknowledge the returns that are being reported from various states. And what they did was they appointed a presidential commission. You had an equal number of Democrats, an equal number of Republicans from the Senate and the House and the Supreme Court, and they kind of came up with, a solution. I don't suspect Chuck and Mitch are on good speaking terms that they're planning
Well, I
this
think
thing.
Mitch is leaving. He's done.
Yeah, done in many ways.
Right. He's old and tired.
Yeah.
I think he stayed a little too long.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. But that would be the hope, because they better have a plan, because this thing, given how people look at the other side as the embodiment of evil and the destruction of the republic.
Considering how contested 2020 was,
This one's going to be worse.
I failed to understand why Joe Biden's response to that was to give speeches demonizing the MAGA conservatives. You really want to bring the country together, which is one reason he was elected, because people thought he said he was going to do it. People thought he was capable of doing it. People gave him credit for being old and wise as opposed to just old. He didn't do it. He did the opposite. He kind of rub salt in an open wound. So I hope whoever wins this time does a better job.
Yeah, and again, the state of Joe Biden.
I'm not so confident that Kamala is up to that. She was, it was interesting the other day when some kid at some rally of hers said Jesus is Lord, and her response was to say, "I think you're at the wrong rally." I thought that was funny, but and her audience laughed, but you could just embrace it or ignore it.
Yeah, because that's America, right? And this is really where the ultimate test of leadership comes in, is that ability to rise above party. And if we're still battling a contested election, days after, it's where Joe Biden really has to step in, and kind of be that voice of reason. We're Americans.
That's not going to happen. He couldn't do it on his own behalf. He's not in a place where he can do that for the country now.
Yeah. I think you're right. I think you're right.
No, I think that's sad.
And I think the rhetoric has gone so far that it's hard for him to now say, all right, everybody, we need to peacefully follow Trump.
Well, if Trump wins, I think that's right. I think it will be very hard for Democrats. I mean, you've got people talking about not ratifying it.
Yeah, which is the very thing that they were accusing the Republicans of doing in
January 6th.
And this is where politics gets really ugly, when you become the very thing that you hate.
Right.
And I see it on both sides, and it is not good for America.
I understand not sharing Donald Trump's views, and I understand not sharing his sense of humor, and I understand thinking that he's vulgar. But I don't understand the deep hatred, the Trump derangement syndrome that I think is so prevalent among Democrats that it gets in the way of any rational behavior.
Yeah. Well, it's again, we saw this a lot with Obama. There was Obama derangement syndrome too.
Not so much.
Not so much. That's for sure. But it existed. My point is that there is an intensification of hatred for presidents that's different than even the hatred for Richard Nixon, right? There is a kind of, it feels irrational because it's not, you can't even have a rational discussion with people. Like even intelligent people having a discussion about Trump, it's impossible. People lose it.
Right, they do.
And so talking politics isn't fun anymore unless you know somebody who's, kind of level-headed.
Right.
But for the most part, you can't have a dinner party talk politics.
The one thing I've heard people agree on about Trump is that serving French fries at McDonald's was actually an act of genius.
I thought that was brilliant. In terms of presidential campaign photo ops, it speaks to the struggle of, the underclass who are trying to work. It's not an assembly line job, right? But it is their job.
And it is a job that lots of people have when they're young, and it's
right.
a starter job, and you move on from there to above minimum wage jobs. It's a great way to learn discipline.
Absolutely. And it's an important part of the economy. There are a lot of McDonald's workers out there who are also voters.
1 in 8 Americans worked at a McDonald's, I read.
That's an amazing stat.
That is amazing.
That is amazing. So that...
Of course, his friend RFK
Yes.
Jr. must be appalled that that he's pushing these French fries that are filled with seed oils. But
it's okay. He knows politics.
not to mention these hamburgers that are so fattening.
Yeah.
And yet delicious.
Yes. Well, they know what they're doing. So what are your concerns going into this election, and what are things going to be like in the day after?
My concern is that there's cheating and Kamala wins, and the country goes to hell in terms of not recovering economically. Her economic plans so far have nothing to do with recovery from inflation. You don't go after price gouging grocers. You go after spending from Congress. You have to cut back on spending. You deal with interest rates. I don't think she knows what she's doing, and I don't think she has a plan. And this is embodied in her overture to black men, where she wants to give black men $20,000 forgivable loans. What is that? That's a gift. You want to hand out $20,000 to get your vote. For what does this do? Does this somehow fix the fact that you don't have a job?
Yeah.
Does this?
Well, she saw the numbers, the poll numbers for black men, and so she kind of the campaign cobbles together this plan. It kind of feels last minute. It's ad hoc. It doesn't feel real. I don't think it's going to work. But it just shows you how they just got blindsided by the feelings of betrayal that many black men feel towards the Democratic Party, that they have been dismissed and in the past attacked. And, well, where else are you going to go? You're going to vote Republican? There was this sense of the Democratic Party that they were just counted in the column.
Well, as the parties have flipped their constituencies and the upper middle class goes Democrat and the working class goes Republican, it becomes easier, I think, for a working class black man to vote Republican because he's joining working class white men. He's not joining wine moms.
That's right. Or the Wall Street kind of corporate set. The Mitt Romney party.
Right.
It is a party that is at least talking about bringing jobs back and protecting American jobs and addressing problems of the inner city.
And Trump was pretty good about opportunity zones.
Opportunities. See, these are, again, this is where both parties should have been, but they abandoned them.
Yep. Yeah. So my fear, of course, is that Kamala wins. That's just my fear. And we get 4 more years of these awful policies that she is unable to repudiate and unable to improve upon.
Yeah. And no doubt, the next 4 years are going to be rough. I don't care who's president of the United States. This economy is showing signs of fragility, and there are no easy answers when you have high inflation and rising unemployment, because the old trick of cutting interest rates only feeds the inflation, and then deficit spending only feeds the inflation. So it's going to be tricky for both.
So we'll all see what happens in 2 weeks, and we'll be back after the election with a new show that is just a broad take on politics in New York and around the country. Thank you for tuning in to the 2024 Presidential Race Review, and have a great night.